to a worm in horseradish, the world is horseradish. This is the Yiddish expression that market researcher Howard Moskowitz used to explain how the food industry was incapable of seeing that there wasn't such a thing as a platonic dish, a perfect choice that would fit everybody, but rather perfect choices for different kinds of people. Following this concept, in 1989, Prego launched the extra chunky tomato sauce with tremendous success. And from there to here, we go to the endless variety of options that today we encounter for every single item in our grocery store. And of course, we all know that this doesn't end at the groceries. Multiplicity of choice is one of the main characteristics of our society. Professor Barry Schwartz, the author of The Paradox of Choice, explains what he calls the official dogma of all Western industrial societies. Quote, "If we are interested in maximizing the welfare of our citizens, the way to do that is to maximize individual freedom. The way to maximize freedom is to maximize choice. However, all of these choices have two effects on people. One effect, paradoxically, is that it produces paralysis rather than liberation. With so many options to choose from, people find it very difficult to choose at all. The second effect is that even if we manage to overcome the paralysis and make a choice, we end up less satisfied with the result than we would have been if we had had fewer options to choose from." End quote. Schwartz uses the example of the jeans industry. Today, there are 300 kinds of jeans. So you spend an hour in the store, if you go to a store, and finally, pick up one that is good, but you leave the store feeling that surely there was a perfect match for you, and you just fail to find it. Because the idea of making choices is so fundamental to how we shape our lives. It is so important that we understand the invitation that Rosh Hashanah, this holiday, opens to us. On Rosh Hashanah, we don't wish each other a happy new year as we do with other holidays, right? We say Chag Sameach, Sukkot, Zman Simchatenu, we say Chag Sameach. In Rosh Hashanah, we rather wish each other a good year. We say Shana Tova. The word good, Tov, appears in the first chapters of the book of Genesis in two different contexts. Number one, at the end of each day, God saw that it was good, not perfect, but good. In contrast to the jeans at the store, it was good. And that was more than enough. Second, the word good appears as the name of the tree of knowledge, Tov Berra, good and evil. Once Adam and Eve ate from the tree, they became self-aware. And with that knowledge, their choices, good and bad ones, started to matter. If so, the greeting Shana Tova might refer to our wish for a year of good choices. But this sermon is not about tomato sauce, nor about choices. While very important, they are only indicators of something bigger. Remember the horseradish? To a worm in horseradish, the world is horseradish. The horseradish represents our society and the paradigms that rule our world. I want to talk to you about two different kinds of horseradish, two paradigms. Modern philosopher Byung-Chul Han described the shift from the disciplinary society into the achievement society. Quote, prohibitions, commandments, and the law are replaced by projects, initiatives, and motivation. End quote. We have shifted from the negativity of the should to the positivity of the can. Yes, we can. We have the freedom to achieve. And productivity-wise, this paradigm seems to work great. The problem is that it reaches the level of what he calls excessive positivity, in which rarely things can ever be good enough, because we can always achieve more. Therefore, we exploit ourselves until we are no longer able to be able. Finally, explains Han, the feeling that nothing is possible can only occur in a society that thinks that nothing is impossible. And it is in this transition, he explains, that we become the burnout society. The other form of horseradish is called liquid modernity, which policy advocator Pete Davids eloquently illustrated in his graduation commencement a few years ago. This speech went viral and later was expanded into a book dedicated, a case for commitment in an age of infinite browsing. Here is an excerpt of what he said then. Quote, I'm sure many of you have had this experience. It's late at night, and you start browsing Netflix, looking for something to watch. You scroll through different titles. You even read a few reviews, but you just can't commit to watching any given movie. Suddenly, it's been 30 minutes, and you are still stuck in infinite browsing mode. So you just give up. You are too tired to watch anything now. You cut your losses and fall asleep. Davis continues, I have come to believe that this is the defining characteristic of our generation, keeping our options open. There is this philosopher, Zygmunt Bauman, he called it liquid modernity. We never want to commit to any one identity or place or community. So we remain like liquid, in a state that can adapt to fit any future shape. Liquid modernity is infinite browsing mode, but for everything in our lives. End quote. Our quest is not to eliminate the multiplicity of possibilities, but rather to find the clarity to choose and experience contentment with one, or maybe a few more, that are good for us. The bad news is that finding and choosing is not that easy. The good news is that Judaism has two phenomenal tools to help us in our search. I believe we can defy the burnout society and the modern liquidity by choosing to seriously entertain and grow in these two fundamental Jewish concepts: commitment and distinction. Kabbalah describes that in the beginning, God was infinite, Ein Sof. And in order to create the world, this divine, infinite Ein Sof needed to reduce itself. It's called Tzimtzum. Similarly, every time that we narrow things down and we choose to commit or to distinguish something, we shape our own worlds. Now, as we say, one of the explanations for not making choices is the fear to commit. I don't know if you have heard of this concept, FOMO. You did. Fear of missing out. But the truth is that that fear only puts us in a cycle of constantly missing out. In Judaism, we speak about mitzvot, commandedness, and commitment. These concepts sound almost counterintuitive to our search for freedom. But the truth is that without choosing to commit to certain things in our lives, we condemn ourselves to prison in infinite browsing mode. Overcoming the fear of missing out and choosing commitment as a life practice may be one of the keys to open the heavy door of the prison of modern liquidity. The other concept is distinction, kedusha. The notion of kedusha and the notion of choice are deeply connected. The action of lekadesh, to make something holy, is to make a distinction. We learned that God on the seventh day created Shabbat, the resting day, by kadesh oto, which means that God made distinctive from all the rest of the days. On Shabbat and on holidays, we do... Thank you, my friends. I was checking on you. We do Kiddush, as we announce that we have gathered to celebrate and recognize a distinctive and joyful time. In the context of matrimony, Kiddushim is the moment in which two individuals say to each other and to the world that they are united, that they are connected by a distinctive tie. In our memorial prayer, Kaddish, we ask to acknowledge that there was a presence in this world that was distinctive to us. The fantastic news is that holiness is not the greener grass of the neighbor, but rather something that we can nurture in our own life experience. We tend to fear missing out on what's tangible to us. However, that's extremely misleading because it keeps us looking at the items that are placed on the shelves in front of our eyes. Those are the tangible ones, and they were arranged by someone else trying to sell us something. As it turns out, not everything can be found on Amazon or eBay or in our neighbor's yard. Some of the most precious things we can acquire can only come to be through our own creativity, ability to commit, and willingness to distinguish. Those will never occur if we are lost or paralyzed in the infinite browsing mode. Furthermore, the price of keeping this infinite achievement search and liquidity could be a life without self-definition. And it ultimately means renouncing the privilege of creating our own world. Aren't you afraid of missing that out? Holiness and meaning are not the result of keeping our options open. They are more likely to be found when we challenge the liquid modernity and the incessant search for what's next. They happen when we decide to be here, fully here, and when we choose to focus as opposed to multitasking. They happen with persistent acts of distinction and commitment. Now, I hope you believe me when I say that I don't want to be a killjoy. However, I'll do that anyway. However, statistics show that only 25% of people keep their New Year's resolution for as long as a month. And only 8% make good on them. Most behaviorists agree that the key for succeeding in New Year resolutions is in consistency. A great illustration of consistency comes from the story of Rabbi Akiva, whose wife would constantly encourage him to study Torah. Akiva reached the age of 40 without ever having studied. Knowing himself as a complete ignorant, he didn't believe that he could ever start. One time, while standing by the mouth of a well in Lydda, he inquired, who hollowed out this stone? And was told, Akiva, haven't you read that water wears away a stone? This is a citation from the book of Job. It was water falling upon it constantly, day after day. At that, Rabbi Akiva asked himself, is my mind harder than this stone? I will go and study at least one section of Torah. Rabbi Akiva then, drop by drop, became the most distinguished Torah scholar that our tradition has ever had. When I was a child, we used to play the board game called Risk. Familiar? We call it TEG, Técnica y Estrategia de Guerra. I Googled Risk a few days ago. Now, we all knew that one of the most effective strategies to win was to take small continents first. The idea of the drops means small wins toward the bigger picture. Now, for commitment, consistent small actions and small wins. And I want to invite all of us over the next 10 days of Teshuvah, between Rosh Hashana and Yom Kippur, to think about what can be a commitment that we are willing to take. A small action. Maybe something like turning off your phone notifications or deciding that after a certain hour, we don't check emails because we want to dedicate our attention to other things. I also want to make the case for the other idea, distinction. In our tradition, the most emblematic framework for distinction is, who's the Shabbat? The Shabbat. In his book, The Disappearance of Rituals, philosopher Byung-Chul Han says We can define rituals as symbolic techniques of making oneself at home in the world. They transform being in the world into being at home. They turn the world into a reliable place. They are to time what is home to a space. In a world that praises incessant busyness, 24/7 availability, sleep deprivation, endless choices, infinite possibilities, and phone notifications. In that world, we hope to build our home, committing to the practice that one day a week, there are things that you will refrain from doing, and there are other things that you for sure will do. It's a game changer. I'm not offering a formula for a Shabbat practice. That's for you to define. But I am suggesting Shabbat as a formula to beat infinite browsing and burnout. Dear friends, in our tradition, the celebration of the new year doesn't start by looking forward, but rather by looking back, by reflecting on our choices, on our commissions, and on our omissions. We start by recognizing our numbness in places where we wish we were awake. We start the year trembling for the fear of missing out on the opportunity to create our own world. We start the year reminding ourselves that our new concept in Masal Israel, our fate is not decreed, but rather something that we can shape with consistency and small wins. And so, we start the year affirming that a meaningful life, a life of connection and holiness, is within reach. We start the year wishing each other Shana Tova, a year of goodness and a year of good choices. You can say Shana Tova. And finally, the world might be horseradish, but we are not worms, my friends. Shana Tova.